Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you, Jorge, for solving that. He hits like one thing.
Nice, Jorge.
All right, let me pray, and then we'll dive into our discussion tonight. Father, I do thank you this evening once again for who you are. You are a great shepherd. You are a perfect and loving Father. You are a righteous King, and we're yours. This church is yours. And anything that we do here, we want to do it in a way that glorifies you and honors you, and in a way that represents and reflects the vision that you've given us. And so help us to do that this evening. Just guide us through the things that you've put in front of us, and help us to walk out with a deeper understanding, and just bless our conversation. May we hear from you and follow your steps and your guidance. So we give this time to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay, so everybody's got a packet. If you see someone come in that I don't see, make sure you point them to the packets over here. That will give you everything that you need to follow along with for the evening here. To start with, at the very beginning of that packet, is just a list of the scriptures that we have been referring to over and over again during the different proposal talks and all the rest of this. These are scriptures that have just become part of the way I think in all of this. This is really, for me personally, this is ultimately what I'm after is finding a way to better represent what God has given us in the Bible. And he's given us some phenomenal pictures of what the church looks like. Throughout my entire life, I have faced different versions, different representations of what church looks like in all kinds of different ways. But constantly coming back to this reality, especially the Ephesians 4 passage, the first one that's listed there, the picture of a body, that we as God's people function as a body. He gives value, equal value to everybody in the body. Christ distributes his gifts to the members of his body, and as we come together, we bring all that together to represent what he has given us as a whole. Not just to run off living our lives independently and individually and going, I have my gifts, it's my relationship with God, this is how I'm going to live out my faith. Over and over again, Paul in particular, but Peter as well, bring us back to this reality that we belong to something much bigger than our individual lives. And our culture fights us all the time. Like, there's no question that I'm being told through all kinds of different channels every day that really what matters in life is me. And what I think, what I decide, what I do, the way I see things, the decisions I make, my interpretation of right and wrong, all of these things, all that matters is what's on my mind and in my heart. And I do love the fact that God doesn't operate that way. When he speaks to us, he does certainly speaks to us as individuals, and we have a personal faith, but he speaks to his church, he speaks to his body. When my brain communicates to my body, it does not just go, okay, pointer finger on right hand, here's what you're going to do. My whole body is involved in me doing this because the whole system works together. And so this picture just comes back to me over and over again. And the times when I have been swept up in the church working at its absolute best are those times when I see it working as a body, when I see everybody involved in carrying out what God has given them and bringing the gifts that God has given them together. There is so much beauty in that picture of my gifts coming into the picture, your gifts coming into the picture, everybody's portion of the grace of Jesus Christ coming together, and we get to see that. And there is no better way to appreciate and respect each other than to see that in each other as well, and understand that we all have this vital role to play in God's family, in God's kingdom. And And he's called us into this place where we're going to use it all. He wants us to use it all. And so these scriptures just come back to me over and over and over again. The value that God places in us as a whole, as individual members of a whole body. The way that Peter talks about living stones in a temple. Again, not you don't look at the bricks in a building. You can't look at the blocks in this building and go, oh, that block is so much more important. It's so much more valuable than all the other ones. I've had the experience of seeing here in the Twin Cities even some of the older buildings where there is a clearly identifiable cornerstone in those buildings. And I love seeing that because it's a reminder that this is who Christ is for us. And he is and always will be our head. And then we're built into this dwelling place for God. And that gives us tremendous value. And knowing as each one of us looks at our own lives, we are part of something so tremendously significant that God chooses it as his dwelling place. All of these pictures are so powerful to me and mean so much to me that I can't leave them alone, and they just keep coming back to me. So these are the scriptures you have already in front of you. They're just ones to be familiar with. Highlight in your Bible. Make it a part of your regular thinking. Because quite frankly, one of our biggest challenges living in the culture that we do is getting out of the individual independent mindset. This is a pretty good way to do that, to fight against this thing that we're constantly bombarded with, to see ourselves as part of something bigger. And in order to do that, we need to be familiar with scriptures like this. We need to see on a regular basis that picture that God has given us. So keep these in front of you. Get very familiar with them. There are so many other places in the Bible that tie into these pictures of who we are as a whole and how we function together. That whole picture of us being members together in one body under the headship of Christ, living stones in God's temple, a royal priesthood, part of this kingdom. And you know we're going to talk more and more and more and more about kingdom as the days go by, because I haven't even gotten into that on Sunday mornings. We're still laying a foundation for all that. And over the next few weeks here still, we're going to continue to paint a picture of the identity of Jesus Christ. And that plays into this in a big way as well. If we don't really have a deep and full and rich understanding of who Jesus is, how are we going to recognize him as the head of the church? If we have a one-dimensional perspective on who he is and how he operates, we will not fully understand how our head relates to us. We won't be those sheep that recognize the shepherd's voice. We'll miss so much if we don't have this full picture of who Jesus is. And so this Sunday we're gonna have some fun. It is a family service, and we're around tables. We're gonna do some table activities where we're digging into each table. We'll have a very short little passage from somewhere in Matthew, and we're going to talk about with our kids and with anyone at the table. We're going to talk about, well, what do we learn about Jesus from this little passage in Matthew? And again, continue to grow this picture of who Jesus is, who our head is. And then we'll move into Palm Sunday and be looking at the character of Jesus, the identity of Jesus in that setting. Good Friday, we're going to look at the different encounters that Jesus had all the way through that story on the way to his crucifixion, and acknowledge different things about his character, about who he is and all that. And then on Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, we're going to focus in on one attribute of Jesus that is absolutely beautiful, and I think will be a real encouragement for anyone who's there, just to recognize who Jesus is. Then, after that, we'll start to jump into some of what Jesus did and what he taught as a church, and begin to build this incredible picture that we've been given of the kingdom. And so we are going to talk about kingdom this evening. We're going to talk about ourselves as a body, and then how all of this is expressed in the ministry of the church. Because as we look at passages like this, as we look at how the body of Christ functioned back in the New Testament, we often have to put that up against, well, what about today? What does this all look like today? And recognize the fact that it is very different. We are not a collection of household churches meeting in homes and occasionally being able to be together in the temple. We kind of take the temple side of that model, and that's all we do. We do have some things that happen in our homes. We have gatherings that we do outside of this, but things are different now. Things like us owning this building, this piece of property, having a budget, having staff, and all these other things. This is all a new part of the reality of who the church is right now. And we function in this new reality. And so what we want to do is go back again to this biblical model and go, so what does that look like in this new reality? How do we express God's vision for the church in this new reality? Because it is very different, and we have to understand that we face new, different things all the time. One of the, I will say, privileges I had growing up was being a part of all these different expressions of church. For a while, my dad was bivocational. He managed a Christian bookstore, and the other half of his life, which was, he had more than a full life, was we had a house church, and there were about a total of about 40 of us, and we were a house church for a few years. That was a beautiful expression of the church. The last church that my dad pastored in Canada, when I left Canada, was about 2,500 people, and it was a whole different experience. They had a different budget, they had a different perspective on what church looked like and all that kind of stuff. But when it all came down to it, there were certain things that represented church, no matter where we were, no matter the size of the church, all that kind of stuff. It's just, there were things that we encountered, things that were core to us that were the same in all the churches. And we'll look a little bit at that tonight. And so what I want you to do is get in front of you the next sheet, which is this diagram right here. And you've seen the circle before. This is maybe a new version of the circle that you've seen just visually. This is what we're working with right now, and this gives us just a little bit of a different picture. Not structurally, it's the same. This is the proposal right here. But what we acknowledge in this is that there are different quadrants, we've called them, in the ministry of the church today. And some of this certainly does play into what things were like in the New Testament. But also today, we see it in a different way. We see it with some things being emphasized maybe more than others. In one of the quadrants, spiritual formation is a very important part of the church. We do a lot of spiritual growth, focus, and emphasis in the church. It's very important to us. We do a lot of focus on community in the church. If we are not functioning as a community, we're kind of missing that. And this is one of the things that I've said 1,000 times here that I deeply appreciate about Chapel Hill is we are a community, and not everyone can boast of that in their church. That's something we're very, very proud of. One of the quadrants in our reality as a church is resources. The fact that we do have a property and facility, we do have a budget, we do manage income and expenses, we do have staff and have all kinds of HR concerns and all the rest of that stuff. We look at the physical resources that we have, that God has given us, and how we can steward those really well. And then finally, the area down here in the bottom right that we're calling development has to do with our resources as well, but more the human side of things. This has to do with people and how we develop people and steward the people that God has given us. And so these are all parts of the church. On the left side of this picture, this circle that you have in front of you, on the top is spiritual formation, and on the bottom is community. These are the things that we're going to look at this evening. Spiritual formation includes things like preaching and teaching and worship and prayer, And you'll see some of those things listed on the perimeter of the circle in there. Some of the current ministries that we have, and a couple that we're hoping to develop. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is all part of the spiritual formation quadrant of what we do. And these are all critical parts to the life of any church, for sure. And then that bottom left quadrant is all about community. This is about doing life together. And we do that in different ways here. We do it in families. We do it in community groups. We do it in demographic groups. We do it in different classes. This has to do with how we care for each other in this church, how we bear each other's burdens and build each other up. This has to do with how we serve together as a community, because as a community, we can powerfully impact other communities. On Sunday, you're going to hear a report from the trip that happened last week, the group that went out to Kentucky and spent the week out there. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how was the trip for you? 15. All right. This was a good experience. The things that I'm hearing are just phenomenal. Got to see some video, some pictures, all the rest of that stuff. We'll share some of that with you on Sunday. But just the reality that in this community, we can respond to a spontaneous need, like a flood that hit this ministry out in Kentucky, and even on spring break, we've got 11 people that just were like, yep, we'll go. And they just loaded up and took off and drove all the way out there and spent the week there just serving hard, and even to the point where they finished their work and they're like, there's nothing left for them to do. So they came home early. It's great. We'll take that anytime. But the reality that this community came together and responded to something like that is a beautiful thing. We serve together. And so these two quadrants are the one that we're going to look at. We've created a proposal that defines all of these quadrants and further designates the circle into two halves, the left side and the right side. On the left side, it represents one of the boards, and you'll see that in the middle. It states that it's the vision board. And the vision board is what I want to talk about this evening. Next week, we'll get into the stewardship board and talk more about that. But this evening, I want to talk about the vision board. And so I want to begin just talking a little bit about what led to this idea of having a vision board. Where did that come from? Because there are a lot of factors that have kind of pushed us in this direction of proposing a board like this and saying, this might be a better way to do this, a better way to reflect this model that Christ has given us and this idea of a body that functions together under the headship of Christ. And so one of the things that has really pushed us in this direction is the reality that the ministries of Chapel Hill Church have struggled the whole time that I've been here for 18 years now. Like many other churches, I would even venture to say every other church, we've struggled with this idea that ministries function in silos. They function in an isolated way on their own, and it is on their shoulders to come up with what's going to happen in that ministry and then carry out the function of that ministry. And that has put us in some difficult places throughout the years. It really has. And it's had an impact, and I'll talk about what that means. But what I'm talking about here is things like, for example, men's ministry operates on its own in its own little silo. Women's ministry operates on their own. Engage, children's, youth, they're all planning and executing what they do independently, and that has led to some frustration, some burnout, a sense of isolation and not having the support that we really should have. It hasn't really well represented the idea that all those ligaments are joined together and the whole thing functions together. It's been very disjointed, and we've had, and I'm not, any criticism that comes out of my mouth tonight is not an overall criticism of the ministry of this church. I would have been gone long ago if it would just flat out failed. I would have blamed myself and walked away. I've been seeking and searching for a better way to do this, a better model, a better idea for this, because we have these beautiful bright spots, and I just want to see those bright spots come together and support each other and function together. But silos has become a problem. And so over the years, we went through like the basket weave idea that we've shared with you, and some different ways of trying to get ministry leaders together and thinking through things together and doing ministry leader meetings where we do some joint planning and that kind of stuff. I feel like there needs to be another step. Like we need to go further in this, in bringing those together so that we're not functioning in silos, that there's a more cohesive plan there. One of the factors that has pushed us in this way is that this siloed approach, this siloed reality, leads to a lack of direction in discipleship. Ministries, each of the ministries has kind of their own picture of what it looks like. What does discipleship mean? How does it work? How does it play out in that ministry? And well, every single one of the ministries may be headed in a really good direction. They're not headed in the same direction. We're headed in a bunch of different directions, and there isn't that cohesiveness, and that gets tough. So our ministries get stuck operating in isolation. They set these goals, some of them very intentionally, some very randomly, but all independently. And that, again, makes for some great things happening in a church, but not a lot of things that tie the church together into one discipleship plan that moves the church forward together. One of the other things that has played into some of the move, the push, the angst towards trying something different is that disconnect between Sunday mornings and the rest of the week. What I'm doing on a Sunday morning, well, it may trickle down into some of the ministries. It's not setting an overall tone. It's beyond my capacity to just go, okay, well, here's the plan that I have for all of our ministries. This is how we're going to all be cohesive. I can't do that, and I shouldn't be doing that. It's not something I should be doing in isolation. But because of the way that things are done currently, we have that disconnect. And better things certainly could be happening if that disconnect wasn't there. Setting a discipleship path cooperatively means that ministry leaders and staff and others need to be working together in order to create and carry out a discipleship plan for our church. And I believe that God wants his body to function together and move together. So why wouldn't we be looking at that? Another factor in all this has been just what I'm calling the dead-end experience for ministry leaders. And it's kind of this idea that when you do reach that point where you're leading a ministry at Chapel Hill Church, where do you go from there, right? And there's that the lack of intentional, like, what do we do with our ministry leaders? How do we get their voices involved in determining overall vision and direction for the church? How do we better equip and disciple our ministry leaders, and not just expect them to be discipling those in their ministry and through their ministry, that kind of thing. We want to do better than just supporting them in their independent and isolated siloed ministries. We want to pull it all together. And we have this group of ministry leaders in this church who are all fully capable of discipling others. How do we tap into that? How do these people bring their gifts together, combine them with the gifts of the staff members that we have that are working day in and day out to minister and serve here? These are all things that we want to look at, and this has brought on that desire to create something like what we're talking about tonight, a vision board. And so what all this has done has created this reality that we're really busy, but we don't have a common direction. We don't have a common goal. We have some great things happening, but we are all well aware of the fact that life itself will keep us very busy. How much further do we want to go in adding to the busyness without it meaning something to the whole body, and all going in a common direction? And quite honestly, this has been a tension in every church that I've been a part of throughout my 59 years of existence. There's just been that. It's been an event-based, program-based, busyness-based approach to ministry where, yep, we want to give them something good to do. We want our people to have great things to be a part of. But I have yet to see a really cohesive bond, that a vision, a goal that brings a church together to where it's all moving forward together. And it doesn't mean we don't have individual ministries. It just means that they're all working towards something. It all plays into something. And so then, again, in every church that I've been in, you see this utilization of resources where it's just there ends up being this imbalance between what budget is used for and what it's not used for, and how do you get resources if you want resources, and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's independent, individual, isolated ministries kind of asking for their piece of the pie, and it doesn't all flow towards a common purpose, a common vision. So this is just one of those things that has been weighing on me for a long, long time. All of these different factors continue to push towards this idea of there has to be something out there. There has to be a better way to do what we're doing. Hence the idea of a vision board. This is where it's coming from. So let's talk a little bit about the vision board. Go back to the quadrants in that circle that are involved in a vision board, what a vision board addresses. The two quadrants are spiritual formation, which is in the top left, community, which is in the bottom left. These are the two things that are affected by a vision board. A vision board is over these two areas, these two quadrants in the ministry of the church. And the reason for that is because there is, as you look at giftings as they've been laid out in Scripture, as we see them in practice today, there are more similarities between these two quadrants in terms of gifting, and there are more similarities between the two quadrants on the other side of the circle. And so these two kind of have a natural partnership. And so, looking again at spiritual formation, we're talking about things like preaching, like what I do and where we go on Sunday mornings as a church overall. Teaching ministry, what's being made available in classes, in Bible studies, all that kind of thing. We look at prayer and the part that it plays in this church. That is a spiritual formation component. We also look at worship. How does this church enter into worship? And a lot of times when it comes to this picture of discipleship, which we're going to keep coming back to here as we go, this is where we stop our focus. We go, okay, discipleship is about teaching and learning. This is the dimension that we look at. Discipleship is a class, it's a program you go to, it's a curriculum that you take, and so it definitely fits into the spiritual formation quadrant, so that's discipleship. But here's the question that I want to ask you on that. I want you to think back through the experience of Jesus, 3 years that he spent with his disciples, plural. How did Jesus make disciples? We know, I already covered the teaching thing. We know that he taught. Obviously he did, right? And we're going to cover lots of his teachings on Sunday mornings as I go through these. We're going to see so much there that he taught. Was there any other component, any other dimension to how Jesus discipled people?
Spending time with them.
Spending time with them. Yep, just every day, all day, right? Yes, he spent time with them. He walked through life with his disciples. What else?
It was an example.
Yeah, he modeled all of it, didn't he? And not just that, what did he expect of them?
They would model that as well.
That they would model that as well, right? This was a life that imitates a life. And that's more than just sitting down in a classroom and receiving instruction. What else?
There wasn't a disconnect. A disconnect in, well, this is part of my life over here, and then this is my life with Jesus.
Yeah.
It was, this is life.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't that disconnect.
It's a whole life thing. Exactly. It wasn't a compartment. It wasn't something that you schedule into your calendar and you give your 10% of your time, and that's your life as a disciple, right? It's not It isn't something that we isolate and do separated from our lives. He didn't do it that way. He doesn't want us to do it that way. But what else?
He partied with them.
He partied with them. Come on.
Wedding party, dinner parties.
Marty, the water to wine thing. He partied with them. He entered into, and not just that side of it, but what other kinds of emotional experiences?
But he shepherded them. He knew them by name. He knew them.
Mm-hmm.
They were seen by him.
It was very personal. It was very relational. There was an understanding and a knowledge of and a familiarity with each other that went way below the surface. Yeah, which
He
always
kind of had
leads
an
to
upper
stuff.
hand, though.
He did. They didn't. Yep. Yeah, he could see things that, quite frankly, I'm glad I can't see. Yeah. What else? Keep them coming, because there's more.
He corrected them.
He did, yes. Yeah, there were times when he had to call them out on things. Yep. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. I talked last Sunday about that the back-to-back statements. Blessed are you, Peter, because you got it right. My father's revealed this to you. He was so proud of Peter. 3 verses later, get behind me, Satan. Right. There was some correction that happened in there. Definitely, it wasn't all this build up. There was some. Yeah, he had to challenge them. Yeah,
He had to pull them out of the brambles.
very much so.
And demonstrated outreach. They did it together, and he sent them out.
Yeah. There was a very clear component to this that you can't miss. They were on mission all the time. So discipleship was carried out on mission. It wasn't, even though he was reaching that point of sending them out, there was a lot happening before he sent them out, right? There are even those times when he goes, okay, you guys go try it and report back to me, right? There was this progression of watch me, and then there's do it with me, and then I'm going to send you out and you report back to me, and then eventually I'm going to send you out with the promise that you never leave them, which was just amazing. But yeah, all on mission, all outreach oriented, and then a very official commissioning and sending. Anything else?
Paul, I'm forgetting the verse, but it's I no longer live, that Christ can live, that Christ lives in me. So I think that was reciprocal. He gave of himself, and he took himself fully on. So I think that's part of that discipleship part.
Yeah, part of what he showed them. Like, he set so much aside to disciple them, and that again was this model of them doing the same thing, turning around and doing that. He sacrificed so much. That picture that he continued to give them, this is what I'm going to do. The foot washing, right? He gets down on his hands and knees, and it didn't just end with that. It carried right on into, this is what I want to see you do for each other, and that just continued to build. Anything else?
He welcomed them in.
He did, didn't he? Yep. We've talked already on Sundays about what a misfit bunch of unlikely, can't get over that. I keep having these little visions of what it must have been like sometimes for a zealot and a tax collector to go at it, and yeah. But he welcomed them in. He did. Full acceptance. Not without a desire to transform, but an unconditional love from the get-go. There was an awful lot that happened. There were an awful lot of dimensions to this discipleship process that Jesus walked through with his disciples. It was far more than a classroom. It was more than what was seen at that time. It was more than disciples coming to a rabbi, sitting down, learning, memorizing, doing everything they can to get really, really good at what their rabbi did in terms of his understanding, his knowledge of the scriptures, his practice of religious rituals and traditions, and all those kinds of things. There was just this broad spectrum of things that they experienced together. This is whole life. I said that already. This is whole life. And at Chapel Hill Church, or any church for that matter, we have been called, we have been commissioned to make disciples. And all of that is part of our calling, it's part of our commissioning, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. Again, more reason even for us to pull together our experiences, our gifting, all of these different things that we talked about, the relationships that we have, to pool all that at the feet of the Lord and just go, okay, we bring all of this to you. We bring this whole experience to you. Now use this for the sake of your kingdom. But that, of course, is just one quadrant. That's spiritual formation. Let's talk a little bit about community. This is another aspect of discipleship. This is something that we see happening here in our different adult ministries. Men's, women's, engage. We see this in children's ministry. We see it in youth ministry. We see it in community groups. We see it in outreach as we serve together as a community in the community. We see it in an area that we've been referring to as congregational care. This is a growth area for us. We'll talk more about that in the future, but how do we take care of each other, bear each other's burdens? We have these little pieces of that we're living out and doing. But there's more opportunity there. This connects with our value of living in love. How do we express the picture that God has given us for a community? Because discipleship does not happen individually and independently only. It happens in community. We've used the phrase here, we grow better together. That is reality. My greatest periods of growth in my life have been when I've been a part of a community that is growing like that. Not just on my own, when it's just up to me. Living in community is absolutely essential to being and making disciples. Even as Jesus sent out his disciples, and there were different steps to that. Did he send them out individually? When he first sent them out, he sent them out 2 by 2. There was always another dimension to this. It was do this together, and that was just a part of their calling. So, another question for you. This has to do with Chapel Hill right now. How do you see discipleship happening in community here in this church? What are some examples of how discipleship is taking place in a community setting here in this church?
Bible studies?
Yep, definitely.
Youth groups, small groups.
Yeah, the breakout groups are great. There's all kinds of community being built there.
I enjoy on Wednesday mornings having the complete, the moms of littles and those in between, and then now, it's
Yeah.
opened up to women to be together, and we can disciple each other by just being together and
Yeah.
sharing with each other and hearing each other's challenges and
Yeah.
encouraging each other and the whole piece. Yeah, it's great.
We do a men's breakfast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Children's events like the musical and PBS.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Which, thank you for opening that door. I'm going to put a plug in. We're really hurting for VBS volunteers. They don't want to hear Lori say, well, we're going to have to cap off the number of kids. Right? I don't want to hear that. Anybody you know, any chance that you might be available, we're way behind on volunteers right now. And I know it's only April, so. What else? How do we see discipleship happening in community here?
New glasses class.
New glasses class. Yep. We're learning together. This is good.
Church work day.
Church work day. Thank you. May 3rd.
I think praying together, like, that is community in itself, and then that branches out into all sorts of, like, I see that leading to what seems like coincidences but isn't, like, in my communication with so many people, like, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
From one prayer, and then there will be like weeks of communication with people in the church, and I just know that it's from prayer, so I think that's community.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hanging out in the kitchen.
And out in the kitchen.
Hey,
Oh, yes.
we have some good conversations.
Yep. Yep. There's more. What else? Throw me a few more. How are we? Hmm?
Meal trains.
Meal trains, absolutely. Yep. Serving each other, and that's part of the discipleship process is we serve each other and we're generous with each other, bear each other's burdens.
Outreach.
Outreach, yes. So I'm going to talk about one of the most powerful experiences for me on a weekly basis. It's not going to be a surprise. I've mentioned this before, but after the Sunday morning service, I am usually first or second one out the door. Not going home. Although, yeah, half the family used to leave growing up because we didn't want the roast to burn. But I get out of the sanctuary and I go stand out in the lobby to be available for whoever wants to talk to me. And I go through that same, like, the invisible middle schooler that no one wants to talk to because nobody's coming out. Is that discipleship, though? Yes, it is. And it's beautiful to see a church that wants to stay together, hang around, talk to each other, fellowship with each other, and even take Kyle seriously when he says, hey, we're 2 minutes early today. Look around for somebody you haven't met yet and introduce yourself. Right? This is us getting back to this picture that discipleship is a whole life experience, and that even in that there are relationships being built. So yes, discipleship is happening. It's part of the picture. Listen, we have plenty of room to grow in the community aspect of discipleship, but we have to recognize the fact that this is going to involve more than a top-down approach of those at the top figuring out what's our strategy and then passing that strategy on or dictating this is how discipleship is going to happen. It involves an entire church recognizing that we are surrounded by discipling opportunities all of the time, where we and again we got to get away from this idea that discipleship only happens if the one doing the teaching disciples the one doing the listening and the learning. Right? Paul himself, in one of, I think it was to the church in Thessalonica, talked about how he couldn't wait to get there to receive from them. Right? This is St. Paul we're talking about, but he's there to be discipled, not just to make disciples. That it was all throughout the body that this was happening. And community is so essential to that. We create this connection, this bond where discipleship happens. That is a part of what we're doing. That is a part of this side of the circle. So I want to get more specific now about the vision board. So go to the next, this little packet in here. How many of you have seen this online now, at least taken a look through bits and pieces of it? It's there, it's on our website, and you can go and knock yourself out going through every detail, every word, and make sure our grammar is all correct and all the rest of that stuff. We'll take it. I want to go through this not entirely word by word. I don't want to do that because that will take us the rest of the night. But I want to hit on some things that I think are really important here. So, some generalities about who the vision board is. There's a heading there that says about the vision board. This is what it's there for. This is what the idea is for. Oversees the church's spiritual direction and community flourishing, ensuring that Chapel's mission to make flourishing disciples is effectively carried out for kingdom purposes. It's led by the senior pastor. This is why I'm talking tonight, is because this is where my gifting lies, not in this one that somebody else will talk about. This is really my heart, and where I find the deepest connection. Consists of the vision board consists of ministry staff and leaders of the ministry teams within the spiritual formation and community quadrants, which you'll see on that circle diagram in the perimeter of the circle. The focus here is on overseeing community flourishing, whole church engagement, and relational disciple making, and vision casting for spiritual formation and health. Covers a lot of things. There's a lot mentioned there. And so talking about the actual makeup, you get into the next section in there that says the leadership on those 2 pages. Here's what different roles would be represented on a vision board. Myself, I would be a part of that as the senior pastor. Ministry leaders or representatives from community building ministries or spiritual formation ministries, from the worship ministry, children's, youth, community groups, outreach, prayer, community congregational care. We've talked about that, and we'll need to work on that more in the future. And even there's a little future vision thrown in there. This is what we're trying to get Preston to do. The young adults ministry, something that we've struggled to launch for years here, mostly just because when our high schoolers graduate, they leave. So that's just part of our reality. But these are different roles that are carried out and participate on a vision board. They're represented by these people. And so that's in there. That potential makeup of the board is laid out there. Then there's something that says the big picture. And it says this. It says the vision board ensures that spiritual formation and communal life at CHC is aligned to guide all individuals in the church towards growth in Christ, living in love, impacting the world, those are our values, and participation in God's mission through intentional vision casting and strategic direction that focuses on relational discipleship making that builds up the body. This is all bringing gifts together to form this vision and direction for the church in this area. The board collaborates with ministries to develop direction in preaching, teaching, prayer, outreach, community life, and relational disciple making, and ensures that every strategic decision is evaluated by its potential to grow disciples, nurture community, and impact the world for the kingdom. There's a mouthful that talks about the overall big picture of why a vision board. What is it hoping to do? What are the responsibilities of the vision board? Well, look at the 3rd and 4th pages that look like this. They have that chart on them, headed by the words, our missional responsibilities. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to start with the first couple, and I want to talk to you just a little bit more about those, because this helps us, I think really helps us understand how this board functions and what it does. Look at that first one that comes on this chart, okay? On the left, the board's responsibilities.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
In the current state with the elders,
Yes.
do these leaders meet regularly with you at all?
Not all of them, no. What the E-team has been trying to do is create ministry leader meetings where we've done a lot of equipping and that kind of stuff. We've had individual ministry leaders that have met with elders, but E-team has kind of served as a liaison between the two. And yeah, it's hard. That pressure on the elder board then to be able to meet with all of the ministry leaders and staff and do all that, it's not feasible. That's part of the pressure here. So yeah. Okay. All right. First section in the left column. Oversee spiritual growth and transformation. On the right side, the missional work carried out by the board. Collaborate with leaders in the spiritual formation quadrant ministries to create a plan that ensures all teaching, preaching, worship, and prayer is focused on guiding individuals into a flourishing, contagious relationship with Jesus Christ. There's our mission statement. So that the body of Christ is able to partner in God's mission of multiplying disciples. This is a unifying process. This is intended to bring us together, and I need to make sure you understand this is not a task. This is not an event planning focus for this board. This is on a higher level in terms of big picture stuff. This is a conversation about how we move a church forward in the area of spiritual formation. It's why this board exists. A question for this board to consider would be something like this. How do we, the vision board, ensure that our church is being discipled in their relationship with Jesus? Having a broader group representing that question, having that conversation. So imagine this, the senior pastor, the adult ministry leader or leaders, the worship leader, family ministry director, our outreach team leader, our prayer ministry leader, and others having that conversation together. That to me excites me. There's life in that. In having that group together, wrestling with a question like this: how do we ensure that our church is being discipled in their relationship with Jesus? That's a bigger question that needs the gifts of these people to come together and have this, walk through this together. I think that just, again, excites me. That brings beauty to this picture of having a vision board. This kind of conversation, this kind of function for this board would absolutely, definitely impact what I do on Sunday mornings. And that's super helpful to me. Just so you know, in case you thought otherwise, I do not just sit in my little bubble and go, what are other cool preachers preaching about now? And I should just do what they're doing. Believe me, the opportunity is there to go to sermoncentral.com and just download somebody else's sermon and just go. My job could be really easy. But that's not how I believe the local church functions. I believe that God has a direction for us. I gain that direction. I hear and listen through my interaction with staff, with ministry leaders, with others that I'm in relationship with, through the different counseling opportunities that I have with people in this church, the different mentoring roles that I play, and I'm on a regular basis mentoring specific individuals through just paying attention to what's going on. Taking in what's in the prayer letter and all those kinds of things. I try really hard to let God speak through what's going on in this church in order to guide what I do. A board like this would make that even more effective, to be able to listen to what's going on in our ministries. What are they hearing? And then to be having this conversation together and go, okay, we're all seeing the same thing. Let's move together in that direction. Right? Versus, well, let's wait and see what Paul has. Oh my goodness, he's lazy. He's going to spend a year in Matthew. That's not laziness, by the way. That is,
Hey, I
that is
think
a
that's
labor
awesome.
of love.
Yeah, by the way, I'm sure a lot of other people.
We're having big fun. I mean, I'm thoroughly enjoying this. I hope you're okay with me just now being completely out of order on everything, but you'll get it when we get to the teachings. I think we'll see that. But even landing there came from just a lot of listening and observing and asking God to show me. Again, take that out of my office into a board setting where we have all these people with these gifts going, what are we seeing? What are we hearing? Where should we go? God, what do you have for us? And just seeking the Lord together for this. That is, again, it's a huge task, but it's a conversation. It is not it's not like, okay, we have to plan an event, we have to plan a series. It's hearing God's vision, but it will absolutely and definitely impact what I'm doing, and where God takes us as a church. Far more effective structure for me. Okay.
Paul, can I ask?
Yeah, jump in.
What's keeping us from doing that now?
Capacity, really, and just having an agreement that this is what we want to do, this is how we're structured, because we're going to have to give up some other things, right? We're going to have to say that this is what we're asking of our ministry leaders, is to be a part of this now. That it's a common vision, it's a common direction that we agree on, to have this kind of a structure. So versus me just saying, hey, I want this group of people to get together, right? I want that to be our decision, that that's what we're going to do. It's taken a long time to develop this to this point and say, yeah, this, I could see this working, but I don't want it just to be done like without everybody knowing, and I'm just inviting a bunch of people. Yeah, so that's all. All right, second one on the chart says formation of a healthy church community or family. On the right, collaborate with leaders in the community quadrant ministries to ensure all community ministry work is focused on living out the gospel in love as a family in order to represent God's kingdom and draw others to the hope of Jesus. Here we're back to that idea of what if a board like this, in their capacity, was having conversations about how we effectively disciple in community. How do we create that kind of environment here in all that we do? You heard me mention recently from the stage that the church is full of shepherds. That was something that hit me in such a profound way. Seeing the people around us, the way that Jesus saw the people around him, and responding as he responded and as he was calling his disciples and said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And he looks at his disciples and goes, let's pray that God sends us out there to do this, and sends more and more and more and more. Having that mindset, that vision that we are this priesthood, a collection of shepherds that are there to just disciple in community, and that we all see a part in that in every experience, in every encounter, in every environment, we have that mindset of this is a discipling opportunity, and so all our community building events, all of that, we're keeping that discipleship vision in front of us. Looking then through this again, I'm not gonna go through all of these. The third responsibility, to develop a clear discipleship strategy. Right, we've been talking about that already. Fourth responsibility, develop the relational aspect of disciple making. Fifth responsibility, congregational care, an area, like I said, to be developed. We have little bright, shiny pieces of that, but keeping focused on how we care for each other as a church family. Something to be addressed in this by this board, something to talk about. Again, a great conversation. Look at the one at the bottom of that page, because I want to use this as a little bit of an example here. That one says nurturing prayer within the body. I want to talk about that for just a minute. We have at Chapel Hill Church, we have various components of a prayer ministry. People do pray. What we've lost recently is our weekly, it was a Thursday evening, Wednesday, then Thursday evening prayer group that gathered together, a small group that was devoted to praying for this church. There are other things that are happening at this church. We have a prayer letter that goes out every week, and we keep trying to encourage you guys, just fill it out, use it, because people are very dedicated to praying through that. We have an emergency prayer chain on the WhatsApp app that goes out when you can be a part of that, and when you have an emergency need, throw it out there, and people are praying immediately. We have other things happening. There are a few guys in this room that are part of my Wednesday morning prayer group. We just celebrated 13 years of doing this here. Every Wednesday coming together and praying, and that is a significant thing. There are prayer gatherings like that happening in all kinds of different ways in this church. Now, currently, we're looking for someone to lead a prayer ministry and bring some more creativity and life to the prayer ministry at Chapel Hill Church. But doing a lot of kind of wrestling and searching right now with like, well, what does that look like? Because typically that would mean that let's find someone who's willing to put together a team and plan some prayer events, right? Because that's how we do it. And they, like everyone else, would do this in an isolated, siloed form, and off it would go. However, if we had a vision board that had this in front of them, hey, we need to bring new life, new creativity, new direction to our prayer ministry, our prayer focus and effort here at the church. Answer this for me. What do you think, given who this vision board is, thinking through who all would make up this vision board, what do you think would be some of the considerations that they would make in a conversation about how prayer can advance and grow and be transformed and flourish at Chapel Hill Church? What do you think would be some of that board's considerations? Again, think specifically about who's on the board and what they represent. What would they be considering?
How to involve all ages.
How to involve all ages. Right. What else? Keep going. Let me be specific.
How to pray for the community outside of the church.
Yes. Wouldn't outreach be saying something like that? Right? For sure. Okay? Kyle's in the conversation. What's he looking at? How do we flourish in our worship services? How does that become a part of our life in that way? What else? What else is in there?
I would think that would maybe kind of give you equal representation. Some ministries are big, some ministries are smaller, and maybe the smaller ones don't feel as powerful, not powerful as a choice of words, but as equal as maybe a larger ministry would. So I think there'd be some equality there because you're all focusing towards the same goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like if you have the meal train people on here, then we can say things like, hey, did you know so-and-so is having these issues that they maybe didn't put out there, or, we went to so-and-so's house and delivered a meal and they're actually having problems with their baby or this, and we can pray about those things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And right now, meal train just provides meals.
Right. Yep.
One of the things I love about the Wednesday prayer group is when we intentionally share praises, because we're able, especially over time, as we get to know each other, because we're able to see how God is working very specifically. And so I don't know if there's a way to organize that or make it intentional.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
To honor God.
Yep. It needs to be part of that conversation of let's talk about the whole church. What does that mean for us as a body? How do these things come to a place of growth and flourishing? This goes throughout everything, right? Where does I would welcome the feedback of where does prayer fit into what I'm doing? How can that become more of a component there? What more can we do with the things that we do have, with what we're doing? How do we better communicate these things? There's all kinds of different things to consider. If there's a group of people with similar gifts working together to move this picture, this common goal and vision of discipleship, there's a whole lot more than planning a prayer event, which has great value and needs to happen, but it broadens the picture. So there's just a whole lot going on. Okay, so
Can I throw one thing out there?
yep, fire it out. Yeah, please interrupt when you want.
It enables the entire body on that board and their ministry to work in a cohesive manner where we're talking about prayer on a Wednesday with the youth, on a Wednesday with the children, Sundays. It's that, at least for my kids, they have asked, there's a lot of disconnects, right? And when there's a aha moment is when Gavin might hear something on a Wednesday night and you might echo something on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just got those things together, right?
Yeah.
So it just helps that cohesiveness of the church doing the church stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where, like, Paul didn't have to go this far, but he doesn't just, when he talks about the body, he doesn't just mention major organs, right, and the skeleton. He talks about joints and ligaments, right? Everything's held together. It's the cohesiveness part. So important, so important. On that next page, it goes through a few more things, and again, I'm not going to go through them word for word or anything like that. Talks about worship, talks about outreach, talks about collaboration with the stewardship board, which you'll learn more about next week, and it talks about relational leadership development, things that all are a part of this picture that is built as this board works together. The whole concept of this a group of people intentionally working together, called to work together as those that are clearly gifted and working hard in these areas. And that's why we're talking about ministry leaders, staff. Sometimes, to be quite honest, the staff feels like we just execute. That's all we're there to do, right? That there isn't the people that are giving their lives and working hours and hours and hours and hours. There hasn't been room for their voices to be heard as much as they should have been heard over the years. They carry out the tasks, but man, so many of the staff just they look for so many ways to enhance what's going on here. They look for ways to bring a depth and quality and flourishing that we just have no idea about. And they're just serving away day in, day out, many evenings and all the rest of this stuff. I want those voices at the table. I want those voices to be part of the conversation. I want our ministry leaders to be heard. I want all of us to be working together to create a much more, to create more flourishing, to create much more discipleship and a more cohesive and unified, clear direction to carry this church forward. We can keep doing what we're doing and be satisfied with our wins and all the rest of them. Celebrate that there's new people coming on a regular basis and all that. It's that living out of that vision of being a body that I just think is going to bring, because again, my head keeps going back to this principle that Jesus portioned out his grace, and his goal was that we bring those portions together to experience the fullness of his grace. That's what I want to see. I've said that before and I'll say it again. Okay. Questions? Any more questions about the responsibilities that we just talked about for the vision board? Once again, dig in on your own. If you haven't looked through this stuff and really combed over it, take the time to do it and respond to feedback. Give us your feedback and let us work through that. We're not done. We're not done. Okay. Turning the page. What you'll see next, and again, not going to go through this word for word. I am looking at the clock and respecting time here and giving you the encouragement to go and look through this stuff. What you're going to see over the next few pages here are all kinds of things about the terms for the, nope, that's not it. I didn't have one for this one. The terms for vision board members, job descriptions, accountability, those kinds of things are all right here. I will just mention just some highlights that are going to be in there. General summary. What's mentioned in there is a 3-year term. Where that came from is that is where over the years we've landed with elders is a 3-year term. It seems to be a reasonable amount of time. To some it seems like it's forever. To others it seems like really quick. I came across another
So you would have terms for ministry leaders?
on the vision board. Yes, not as ministry leaders, but on the vision board. And again, ministry leaders this is not something that we're saying you are automatically assigned. If your ministry decides that someone other than the ministry leader will sit on the board, that's totally acceptable, right? And then if it's 3 years, then that ministry would look at it, well, who's next, right? That kind of a thing. So those are in there. Staff, as currently listed, would sit on the board as long as they're employed in that role, just because of a deep understanding of how things function here at Chapel Hill. It's not to be really internally focused. It's just it's one of those things, like if somebody is serving full-time in family ministry, why wouldn't they continue to sit on this board? But again, for them to be able to have others that they're bringing along as well. Ministries still function. This does not mean that the ministry leader's only role is to sit on this board. This is a monthly meeting type of an expectation, not this is all that they do. So that's where that comes from. Board members, as I kind of just referred to, nominated by their ministry teams, or for staff by the senior pastor. We'd work through that in terms of like their role on the board and what that would look like. Members are voted into place by the governance board. You'll hear about that in 2 weeks. We'll talk about the roles there. The vision board would have at least 7 members at any given time. Monthly meetings I covered. The vision board and stewardship board would each be responsible for creating impact reports annually that would be shared out through the whole church, and there would be different opportunities for interacting with the church on what's happening on these boards as well. Vision board would be with the stewardship board would be part of creating 5-year strategic plans, and those plans would be, and you pointed this out recently to us, those plans would be established every 5 years, but reviewed more than we're not waiting to the end of the 5 years and then going, so how'd that go?
Right.
Right, and let's quickly come up with another one. That would be an ongoing process, and that would give us a clear opportunity to have a set direction, to know that this is where we're going, to be able to measure how did we do? Did we actually accomplish this? Did we succeed in the last 5 years? What did that look like? All these kinds of things are mentioned in here. Take the time to go through those, and again, to give feedback where you want to give feedback. Ask questions, make suggestions, those kinds of things. We are receiving lots of questions, and we are just in the process right now of releasing a frequently asked questions page on the website with the rest of this stuff, so that you can go and look at a lot of the questions that we have received, and then how they've been responded to. What are the answers to those questions? Those are deeply appreciated, and have a lot to do with the conversations that we continue to have about this, and even right down to things like the specifics about something like the vision board. So like I said, take some time to go through these qualifications, look at the qualifications, let us know what you think. Is this realistic when we're talking about what's required for someone who's going to be on one of these boards? There are things in here like spiritual maturity and our alignment with the church's vision and mission and values, those kinds of things. Things that will define further, like what kingdom integrity means and those kinds of things. But all of this is something that our desire would be to continue to develop those people. Discipleship doesn't stop once you become a member of one of these boards. You're not just discipling others. We will be discipling each other. You will be discipled in that place, in that board, so that this just continues in all directions. Our goal really is to make sure that discipleship is happening on every level, in every corner, every nook and cranny of the ministry of Chapel Hill Church. Again, what this does, the vision board, is it brings a specific focus. It brings similar gifts together and gives that group of people an opportunity to create direction, to create vision for this church. All right, any questions at this point? We've thrown a lot at you, and I've given you more homework because I put it in your hands. You don't have to just go look it up. It's right there. Because I love printing everything. I'm such a paper person.
Well, do you have to be a church member to be a part of this?
Right now, we require ministry leaders to be members and staff as well. So yes.
But you don't have to be a ministry leader, it can be someone nominated from the ministry?
Yes.
That's what I'm confused about.
Yes, correct. If the ministry decides that it's not the ministry leader, that it would make more sense for it to be somebody else. At this point, we are looking at, yes, that would be a member of the church as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we looking at changing that?
We're going to talk about membership. It's kind of on the next on the the agenda. There will be lots of conversations about that. Yep. Sir.
I was gonna ask, how does this alleviate burnout? I mean, we experience it right now. To me, I read this and it says that there's more people involved, and it's for longer term, right? A 3-year term, it's a long term, so he makes a commitment to do that. I guess I'm just curious how this whole thing alleviates burnout, because it seems like it just requires more people to be involved than currently are.
Yeah, I think where we stand right now, it's not asking for a lot more people. It's not. We're working with current staff, current ministry leaders. They are the makeup of the board. And so, other than ministries that we've talked about needing to develop, like congregational care, a couple of things along. You'll see one next week, leadership development. Beyond that, it's working with existing people in existing roles. What I see as being the alleviating burnout step is helping our leaders understand that they're not alone, that they don't have to work through all of this on their own, in isolation in their ministry, that they have that support, that they are being built up as much as they're pouring out, that it's not just them constantly having to give. That goes both for ministry leaders and staff. That's the for me, I've gotten a taste of that, like what it is to have these kinds of conversations and how energizing that is. And if we, when we bump up against the idea that this feels like just another thing that we're adding, the idea is to do worthwhile things, and where we need to eliminate some of those things that really don't contribute to the overall direction and growth of the church. Maybe there are some things we need to stop doing, because we are doing this busyness without direction thing, right? That's something that a board would challenge right away. That'd be part of the conversation. How do we do the right things and do them well, and not just feel like we got to do more and more? Personally speaking, my level of burnout came because of isolation, because of bearing all of that myself. So that's where I'm coming from, in terms of like going, oh man, just to have somebody that I can work through all this stuff with together. It's amazing what that does for burnout, and I count on that. I really do. Our goal is not just to keep adding and adding and adding. It's to streamline and make this as effective as it can possibly be. I believe that will work. Yeah, Craig.
I don't want to speak on the elder part, because I think like at all these meetings like we've heard about how this would affect the elder part and take load off. But I know that we have a few people who are currently do ministry leading here, or who have done it in the past. So I guess to kind of go to Matt's question, like when you guys hear this or see this, people who feel like you're going to speak into this, does it feel more overwhelming? Like, does this feel more load-bearing, or does this feel like it'd be a relief? Or I don't know if anybody feels comfortable speaking to
I
that.
actually was gonna respond after you said that. I lead women's ministry with Kristen right now, and just the idea of actually having like, oh, we should put like terms on these things, right? Like, that is, to me, that's such a relief. Like, only 3 years, really? Like,
Yeah.
it's not this indefinite thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, the idea of having a conversation where it kind of narrows our focus a little bit is a huge relief.
Yeah.
I honestly, hearing this originally, I was thinking like, this just sounds like more meetings and more work, and it
Yeah.
stressed me out.
Yeah.
But hearing this today makes me really excited, because I do think that like to get together in a room and talk about like, this is the direction our church is heading, can really put some wind in the sails of like, all right, this is where we're gonna go, and I can take something that I know where it's going and direct it, but to actually have to come up with the whole thing on your own is really exhausting.
It is
And that's
exhausting.
what burns you out.
Yes.
So, I would agree, yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting the right picture, but I think I am. Just that we've had the elder board, and each elder has had certain things under them, but they weren't things that necessarily they had a real connection to in the part of the ministry, where this kind of arrangement is that there would be people from that are involved in a particular area that would be representing their area on the board because they know what it is. And that would take a lot of pressure off of the elders. And I don't know where, I don't know the whole picture of everything, but I just picture that it would give proper representation to each of the different areas that are
Yeah.
being represented.
Yeah. Yeah, watch as it comes together as we talk about the other boards, and yeah, it's, to me, it's really encouraging. There was somebody over here, yeah.
Okay,
Andrew.
so I both feel overwhelmed by this and like this would be great. And I think my biggest concern, because of the ministries that, because looking at this, the ministries that I'm doing now are actually in multiple places, so we
Mhm.
talk about that later.
Yeah.
But those groups, I'm the only person of the 20 people that help that is a member of the church.
Mhm.
Many of them are just people who've been attending for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So if it becomes, not only do I have to recruit people to be on the team, but then I have to recruit people who are actually members to be on the team to then take over these roles. That seems overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think this is great, but that piece seems
That's a
overwhelming.
conversation that we've got to have. You're
Okay.
absolutely right, yes, yeah. Yep, that's an important point. That is, yeah. Ron, did you have your hand up?
Yeah,
Yep.
just as a past men's ministry leader, being in a silo is very taxing. I tried a long time to try and get connections to work, not as a silo, but to work together on a single purpose, and that would be tremendous to be able to do that and be able to connect in with other people and what the church is going to as a whole, rather than everybody doing separate things.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like this just makes a formal, you have to be part of this vision board, therefore it's like a role, it's a job. I hear these, like, you know, saying that, oh, if I look forward to this is encouraging, like, to me that says that there's no reason that couldn't work now,
Mhm.
and that this is just formalizing a board, so you have to make it work. It's in the Constitution, it has to work. We talked about trying to put stuff together before. I guess it just seems like this is just a way to formalize it and to ensure that it is being done, whether or not
Yeah.
people want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. I'm processing as I
Yeah.
talk, so.
Yeah, it changes your mindset towards it, and we're hoping that what it would bring is consistency, that this would be a long-term approach to things. With isolated, siloed ministry leaders, things just come and go. Depends on who's leading it and all that kind of stuff, and so we have these little spurts, and then everything fizzles, and then something else raises up, and all that kind of thing. It's that it is again that formality of going, this is how we function, and so we're going to fit into this to bring consistency and a long-term picture to this. So is that kind of what you're?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think accountability as well,
Mhm.
like accountability to actually do the work, right? I think, in some of the things that we've tried in the past, that kind of lack of accountability being built into
Yeah.
something allows it to be high for a second and then to drop and fizzle.
Yeah.
Or for people to be like halfway 1 foot in on it
Yeah.
and 1 foot out on
Yeah.
it. This way, like, everyone knows where we're headed, why we're headed there, and there's an accountability built in that keeps that moving forward, as opposed to being a, you know, a flash in the pan, is that the phrase that people use?
Yeah, flavor of the month.
And not be person driven.
Right.
Right now, a lot of our ministries, a person will take a ministry because they're called to that ministry, and it goes great for a little bit, but there's not a system built where they're building another leader behind them. And so they're either stuck in it for life, or if they step down, it all falls apart.
Is it accurate to say that our proposal for a new transition is not the goal of trying to reduce the engagement of people? It's trying to restructure it so it's more effective and more communal, right?
Yeah.
So to look at it from a lens of, oh, are we trying to narrow down? That's not the right lens.
Right.
Right.
Right, agreed. Yeah. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I better let you guys go. Let me pray. Thank you again. Feedback to the email address that's on the screen and on the board. Keep it coming. Come back next week and learn about the other half of the circle. Let's pray. God, I do thank you for for who you are. I thank you for the vision that you have for your church, and just even the opportunity just to wrestle with stuff. I just ask that you would guide us, that your will would be accomplished, that we would listen to you really well, and that we would see ahead a church that functions more as a body under the headship of Jesus Christ than it ever has, and accomplishes what you have for it, no matter what the outcome of this is. Just keep growing us and transforming us, and changing each of us individually and us corporately more and more into the likeness of Jesus Christ. Just keep doing what you started in us.